According to science, you're more persuasive than you think you are, so some good news for a change. Here's your mission. I want you to go out into the world and find someone who will lend you their cell phone so that you can make a call. This isn't actually your mission, but I want you to imagine you have to do this, and guess how many people it would take before someone actually lent you their cell phone. Take a second to come up with a number. Now, according to a lot of research in psychology, the number you have in mind is probably more than reality. In reality, it's probably going to take you fewer attempts to find someone to lend you their cell phone than you're probably thinking right now. In one study in particular, they asked people to go up to strangers and try to find 3 people who would lend them their cell phones. And they asked everyone to guess, how many people would you have to go up to before you'd find 3 people willing to lend you their cell phone? On average, people tended to guess that they'd need to go up to about 10 people before they'd find 3 to lend their cell phone. But in reality, when they actually made people go out and find strangers to lend them their cell phones, the truth was that they only needed to go up to about 6 people on average before 3 would lend their cell phone. In other words, half the people they went up to happily lent them their cell phone, which is way less than they expected to be the case. This research has shown this to be the case in a lot of different areas. For example, they've done studies where they ask people to find strangers to fill out a survey. They ask people to go out and get people to donate money to a charity. They ask people to go out and ask strangers to vandalize a library book. And in all of these cases, when people guess how often people will agree to these requests, they're way off. They think it'll take more attempts before they get people to comply than is actually the case. Across all of these different areas, what's clear is that we're more persuasive than we give ourselves credit for. People are more likely to say yes to requests than we expect to be the case. There's one caveat to this though, and this is a study that's hot off the presses. In this study, they asked participants that if they tried to get 10 people to fill out a survey, how many of them would do so? But for half the participants, they were specifically talking about going up to people face to face, asking them to do the survey. But for the other half of participants, this was about emailing 10 people and asking them to do the survey. And the question is, are people just as wrong about their influence over email as they are about their influence in face-to-face persuasion scenarios? The results for the face-to-face version are the same as the ones that I already told you. In this case, when people went up to 10 people, more of them did the survey than they expected. In other words, again, people underestimated their persuasiveness. But when it came to email, people were wrong again, but in a different way. In this case, people were more confident in their persuasiveness than they should have been. On average, almost nobody did the survey when asked via email, and yet people expected about 5 out of 10 of those people to actually comply. So what's interesting here is that most of the time when it comes to face-to-face interactions, we underestimate our influence, but when it comes to email communication, we overestimate it. The big question, of course, is why does this happen? Why are we so bad at guessing how influential we can be? Well, one important point is that we usually aren't thinking about how uncomfortable it is to say no to people. In other words, if someone went up to you and asked you to do a survey, you'd probably feel trapped into saying yes. It feels uncomfortable to say no to this person. But when you're the requester, when you're the person asking others to take the survey, you're not thinking about that. Instead, you're more afraid of rejection than anything else. And so, in some ways, this is why we're so bad at guessing, because we're not taking into account the experience of the people being asked to do the survey, deface the library book, what have you. But what about that email thing? What is it about email that makes us so much more confident than we should be? Well, this study measured an interesting variable, which was trust. The idea being that in face-to-face communications, on average, people are more trusting of the person asking them a favor. Now, obviously that's not always the case. There are times where people come up to you in person and you don't trust them. But again, on average, if people are asking you a favor in person, you have greater trust in them and their request than if the same person emailed you that request. In those scenarios, people are much less trusting. But the thing is, this is a difference that we tend to be blind to. When it comes to guessing how influential we'll be face-to-face versus over email, we're again not considering the experience of the person being asked a favor. We're ignoring that important element of trust that's really high in face-to-face interactions, and we don't account for it there, and it's really low in email communications, and we don't really think about it there either. This all points to an interesting conclusion, which is that if you have a favor that you need to ask of people, just ask. You're more afraid of rejection than you need to be. If you really need directions and you're in the middle of a city, don't be afraid to ask someone for help. People tend to be more willing to help than we give them credit for. And this is true in most cases, except for email. In those cases, maybe you should temper your expectations a bit. But whatever the case may be, asking can be a powerful thing, and it's more powerful than we give it credit for. So when it comes down to it, just ask. See you next time. For more social psychology, subscribe to this YouTube channel, or go to beapeopleexpert.com and find new articles every week about psychological science.